Chapter 2, Section 1 is about writing equations. Last chapter, we spent some time practicing and learning about how to write expressions. So this section is going to be using some of that knowledge that you had from that first chapter, but the difference here is that we're actually writing equations, which means that all of these now are going to have an equal sign involved. So what makes something change from an expression to an equation is that it's going to have an equal sign. Some key words for equal would be is as much as, is identical to, or is the same as. A lot of those all have that word is in them, and that's kind of a key thing that you want to look for when you're trying to figure out where the equal sign needs to go. So just a note that equations are written the same way that we wrote expressions back in chapter 1, except you're going to have this equal sign now. So some steps to follow would be to circle the words or highlight the words, something that you know where the equal sign is going to be. And that's when you want to look for that keyword is. Then you want to start looking for words that represent operations. And we talked about a lot of those in chapter 1. So look for words like product, quotient, sum, less than, the difference of, those kinds of key phrases that we talked about in chapter 1 that represent addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Then you're going to want to decide which words are grouped together. So am I doing a certain operation on the top of a fraction and then dividing by another number or another letter? Then you're going to also maybe need to be able to define a variable. So pick what letter you want to use. And then once you have all of that, you should be able to write your equation. So let's take a look at some examples here. For the first one, it says that I have 7 times a number squared is 5 times the difference of k and m. So the first thing I'm going to look for is that word is, which is right here. And that's going to be where my equal sign goes. So I'm going to kind of think about there's like a left-hand side of the equation, and there's a right-hand side of the equation. So let's focus on what I highlighted in blue. 7 times a number squared. So I know I have a 7, and I know what times means that I'm going to multiply it to something. Now, a number is going to have to be a variable because we don't know what that number is. So I'm going to use n for number, and I know that the number is squared, so I need a little 2 next to that. So this says here 7 times, there's technically a multiplication sign in between 7 and that n, and then this is a number squared. Is, so that tells me I need to put an equal sign. Now let's look at what I highlighted in green. 5 times, so I know I'm going to need a 5, and I'm multiplying again like I did with that 7. But this has something after it that goes the difference of k and m. So when they say the difference of, that means subtraction. And everything that follows that is what we're subtracting. So I'm not subtracting 5 and these items because I'm taking 5 times them. I'm only subtracting the k and the m. So in order to make sure I do this the right way, if I actually needed to solve this problem, is I'm going to put k minus m in parentheses next to that 5. That way I'm only subtracting those two terms. And 5, since it's sitting right next to the parentheses, that does still technically mean multiplication. So I would take 5 times that k minus m. And that would be your equation for that sentence. So let's take a look at the next one. 15 times a number subtracted from 80 is, there's my key word for the equal sign, 25. So again, I would look at, there's a left-hand side of the equation that I'm going to have to write out something for, and there's a right-hand side. So 15 times, so I need a 15 times a number, so I need another letter here. So 15 times a number subtracted from, so the subtraction sign is actually going to have to go in front of the 15n because I'm taking that quantity away from something. And what I'm taking it away from is that 80. So this is going to say 80 minus 15n. Then I need my equal sign. 25, so that's just a number. So I want you guys to take a few minutes and do these practice problems. So pause the video, do the 2 practice problems you see here, and then come back and watch to see what the answer should have been. So for this one, the is word is right there, and it says is the same as, so this is actually a whole phrase that they're using for the equal sign. So you should have cut this apart into these two parts. And if it helps you to do what I do here and kind of highlight or underline them differently so that you kind of know the two different parts of the equation, that's fine. What I would have written out here is you've got 2 plus the quotient of, so you're going to do division, a number, so you needed a letter like n, and 8, and then is, so equal sign 16. For the next one, there's your keyword for the equal sign there. On the left-hand side, we have 27 times a number, so 27n, is h squared decreased by 9, so that means subtract. Now, something else that we did in chapter 1 was write out equations using words. So we were actually given the equation and then we would write it out as a sentence. And so we're going to do the same thing here, just like you wrote it out for an expression, but you are writing it out as an equation. So you just want to make sure that you use that key phrase or one of the key phrases for an equal sign. So for example, this first one, I've got 6 times that x plus 7 equals 22. Remember, anytime that you see a letter, that we refer to that as a number. We don't just say 6 times x in the problem. So we're going to take this one and I'm going to say 6 times a number. And then I'm adding 7, so you could say add 7 or plus 7. Then we have our equal sign, so I'm going to say is, or you could say is equal to, and then we have 22. So there are 2 practice problems for you to try. So again, go ahead and pause the video here, write out sentences that you think would represent those 2 problems, and then finish watching to see how I wrote them and to see if they match what you wrote. So for this first one way you could have done this, and it doesn't have to look exactly like mine to still be considered correct. I wrote 5 times a number, plus 4 is, now I have another variable here, and we did see in some of these up here that they were using like the letter H, and they were using, I think up here they had that K and M up on that first example. So sometimes when they start getting into these problems that have more than one letter, it's okay if you want to refer to them as A or as B. If they had just one letter, I would maybe say still use that a number, but it gets a little bit confusing when they start throwing in multiple letters, because then how do you differentiate the numbers? You don't want to call them all a number. So I would have been okay for this one if you had said is 2 times B minus 6. And then for the other practice problem, I would have said a number squared minus 7 is 34.